Good
Why,
morning,
Mr.
Dr. Brad.
We meet again.
How are you?
Wonderful. I'm so pleased to be here.
No. Are you wonderful because that's your judgment or someone else's judgment?
And I will leave that to the audience to decide. That's a question of decidability, isn't it?
Yes. I've made it through most of my kitchen mess.
Oh yeah. What is the current state of your abode?
It's getting there. It's getting
Is
there.
it?
I got.
No, it's like it's on a scale. It was on a scale before.
Oh, I see. No, it's like Friday after a week as a bachelor. It's not quite. It's not to that state where the kids have been home all weekend. You know what I mean?
I got you.
It's not quite there. But I got to tell you, I have more clothes than God, right? I have a certain amount of clothing.
No, really, literally.
And I'm running out of clothes, so I got to do laundry soon.
Oh my.
That's embarrassing. It's the one thing, the laundry's free, right? It's right. It's just
right
on the hall, right? I mean, right. But you can put it, they have a laundry thing here, but my mother didn't want to put one in, so I don't have one here, so it's just down the hall. So, that means I have to like put socks on and walk down the hall.
Get dressed for company.
That's just too much of a burden.
Wow, well, let's not.
We actually have regulations in this complex. Like you can't walk around barefoot. You have to have shoes on. You can't wear a house coat outside of the home.
There we have it.
Yeah, we have all sorts of. The number of rules is hysterical. They're all awesome, actually, because they're basically guardians against bad behavior. I don't know how they let me in here in the first place, but
they didn't know any better.
Yeah,
that's all. Your mom grandfathered you in. This is all very good. I was having a difficult time yesterday because I was trying to compile a very, very large amount of diverse information to figure out how to talk to Curt about it.
Oh, no.
I was able to manage it this morning because I started doing my job. I slept in just a little bit, and then I started doing my job, and it's like early in the morning, like it's so early that some people would say it still qualifies as night. And but there's not very many people early. It's early in the morning on the Eastern Standard Time when I start.
Yes.
And so there's the frequency of visits is low in the beginning and it picks up, but it's like,
That's curious. Is there anything that people who call you at that time of the morning share in common? In other words, I'm just curious if
there's no commonality that I can detect. Okay. But the complaints they fall within this very narrow band of categories, and it's very occasional, rare outliers.
I see. So
it's standard stuff. It's just
it's mostly take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning, or go to the pharmacy and take 2 of these.
The pharmacy will be when the pharmacy opens, they will have the prescription. Then they will probably take an hour to process your paperwork. So
yes,
everything's gonna. But it's like it's kind of funny though. It is like why someone call me up at 4 o'clock in the morning? Right? Because I run into this. It's like, why are you up at this hour? It's just
well, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, well, I'm going to be absurd here. Is it the late night drinking crowd, or
no? I don't run into
morning worker cloud?
It's like it's workers. I just honestly, it's like some people had like the occasionally be people that are they couldn't go to sleep because they were coughing too much or something like that. They're not able to get their sleep, so they just might as well call a doctor. And the fact that there's a doctor is amazing, because I started this for the audience. It's 3 a.m. is when I usually start Pacific time, right? So it's like, and it's like I say, it's just interesting. I watch the people waking up east to west. It's okay. I keep it track of. It's just interesting.
Well, I know you keep some data on this, but it's it would provide it. I mean, it's one thing, you have your traditional doctor's office retail hours type of thing, right? I mean, but it's always interesting to me, the difference between what occurs in emergency rooms, right? But that's true. And then what occurs in the retail hours. What's happening is you're talking about this new space
That's right.
that's outside of retail hours, but not in the emergency room. And so I'm just wondering, it seems to me that there should be some insight into society at that level.
It is interesting. It's like there's a, so it's like, no, it's really what the trivial matters that get handled in the office usually.
Yes.
What I handle, and then occasional outliers. Like, so this week I did have the first time I had the squad called on a patient was a schizophrenic lady in a homeless shelter in Maine. Mm-hmm. And I had to stay on the phone for, that one was a long visit. That one took about 20 minutes because I had to stay there while the squad was arriving and just keep an eye on this lady because I'm like, I need to hand her to somebody. Mm-hmm. But it's dealing with the homeless shelter and dealing with, just, okay, that's a different kind of problem. And it was okay. It's just,
yeah. So for the audience, this is one of the things I love about Brad. He actually gives a shit about his patients. Right. You take that responsibility seriously.
I do. Yeah. I can't imagine not.
Yes.
Really can't. It's like I hear what other doctors sometimes do. I'm like, I can't even believe it.
Can't even believe you do that. Yes.
No, it's like that can't be true. And I would say it like this if you told me some story that I said, I'm not trying to besmirch your reputation, but I really can't believe it.
Can't believe it. Yes,
unbelievable.
I was trying to describe you to somebody the other day, and I said, well, he's got a little bit of that country doctor thing, like Dr. McCoy in Star Trek.
That's it. I'm just a country doctor, man.
Right. I mean, you are really in some ways, right? So you're it's that pragmatic realism you have, right? That which I find very charming, obviously.
Yeah, charming and quaint. You got to say quaint, because I keep paper. I keep a book with paper and pen and stuff. And it's just
quaint is that would be no, because if the hair gets up on your neck, you'll go out of quaint real fast.
Yes, sir. I will. Quaint is my symbol.
So I'm not gonna use the word quaint. My partner Jim.
Don't let the secrets out of the bag.
He's like this infinitely charitable guy, kind, giving, patient until. But if you switch that bit,
right, just flip the bit.
You just never want to. You don't want to be on the opposite end of that, because as nice as he can be,
unimaginable to want to be there.
Yes, you don't want to go there.
So this is very good introduction, Curt. All very good introduction. So it goes to this moment in history that we are enjoying.
All right, you told me how you're going to make me work today, right?
A little bit. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
Make you work. I don't make you do anything, man. Okay. Albert Einstein is said to have made this quote, which I really enjoy. We cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them.
That's true.
And so what is happening is the level of thinking before your work was sufficient to cause the problems that we're now having to deal with in this train wreck of civilization, globally, I should say. And it's interesting. So I'm studying all kind of different people making content online, and it turns out the conversation essentially goes to there's a too many elites. This is Turchin. There's too many elites, and they're having a war in the clouds. It's like the Olympians on Mount Olympus. They're having battles in the clouds, and it's like there's essentially three fragments of elites, and they break into, interestingly, right and left and neutral. Yeah,
I gotta write notes now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
they break into right and left and neutral. The left is represented by feminine thinking, and the right is dominated by masculine thinking. The neutral ones are just confused because they're trying to believe in that which can never continue to exist.
Mm.
And it goes like this. On the left, we have negative rule of law. And on the right, we have negative rule of law, which is misunderstood as being. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The people in the middle believe that they're in rule of law, positive rule of law, and they're just mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the left, the feminine thinkers are attempting to invoke or chant into real that which is not. And on our side, on the right, we are just interested in correspondence with reality and appropriate rule of law, which is to say, previously I said the positive rule of law is under the neutral. It's only presumed to be real. It's not real.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so is that the point you want to make, or is there more?
No, I'm just getting rolling here.
Okay.
I mean, how this topic is organized that I'm bringing to bear is that we're going from theoretical to more and more granular, particular reality.
Okay, can I add one?
What's that?
Neutral. I would say you're right about negative. And I think the middle believes in positive rule of law.
I think so, but they don't understand what rule of law means, and they're confused.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. All right, continue.
Those people would have been they're the conservatives and the liberals that can't even imagine what's really happening in this train wreck.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's too surrealistic, right? Okay. Now this breaks down. There's fronts of action inside the crashing. There's fronts inside the theater of conflict. And on the left, the feminine have the leftists, the neocons, and the globalists. They are fronts for the operation of New York global finance.
Okay, so the fronts of action side this, and they are, give me them again.
The leftists,
Mm-hmm.
the neocons, and the globalists.
Interesting. Okay.
And then in the middle, the neutral category contains what are called conservatives and liberals. They're like legacy, they're leftovers, they're lukewarm, they're not active, they're being consumed. Right. Because there is no neutral space left, really.
Right.
They're living an illusion. And on the right, politically, there's Trump. And that's the least granular level.
It's called populists, but Trump is
right.
Populist nationalists. So the argument you're saying is that well, it's the pack versus the herd.
Yes.
Versus the where the fuck are we?
The lukewarm, neutral ones that really don't know what's going on. It's awful, isn't it? Say such a thing. Okay. Now, to the next level of granularity, we're going to more particular. The fronts being operated by the left include the trans agenda, the climate agenda, the BLM, what I would call it will be characterized as the oppression narrative is what that one means. Okay. All these are what I would call the establishment agenda, which is, you would characterize it as the left's imperial dominance over the public perceptions.
I can interpret that too many ways.
It's like a Middle Eastern style of governance. The elites are projecting their preferences by command into the public space. So authoritarian.
It's a you must versus you must not.
That's correct.
Okay.
I don't have anybody in the middle. I don't see a middle. Now I'm going to talk about the characters that I see operating on
the uniparty middle.
Yes. I think they're that unipart, yes. They just want everybody to get along. They don't know any better. It's like, okay, that's not what's happening here. So on our side, on the right, we have you doing science. We have Lindsay doing philosophy. We have Armstrong doing finance. We have Catherine Austin Fitz doing general work. That's more of governmental awareness and populist interaction with this. We have Judge Napolitano that is, we're operating from a judicial standpoint and looking around. RFK Jr. doing politics. And a guy named Jason Whitlock doing Christianity. He was recently on Tucker, who's doing actual news work. Tucker Carlson. These are the anti-establishment narrative, right? People. And these people are coalescing around what is true. They're trying to detect true and what is accumulating gravitas by increasing their coordination of conversation. And so because I was watching, looking about and studying it, and I detected two overarching themes in the conversation coming from the right. One of which is national divorce, which is a rising.
You got ahead of me, boss. Are you going to switch to a new front, or you talking about a means or something?
I'm talking about what the discussion is on under the populist right agenda. The rising conversational themes.
Okay, go ahead.
So national divorce is chief among them as a rising narrative. Catherine Austin Fitz was very interestingly talking about the generation of, from the left, the response to COVID was health authoritarianism as justification for government authoritarianism over the public. So dominance, imperial style, just as justification to cause the rubes to believe it and to accept their yoke. And she was specifically talking about, I call it a collusionist conspiratorial insurrection against the people, which is against the populists, to maintain their imperial status by the left, which represents the interests of the New York international finance people.
Okay, okay, so I have the feminine left and their oppression narratives.
Yes.
I have the masculine right and their authoritarian narratives. And
No.
It's going to be masculine right and their conspiracy narratives. And then I have the on the masculine right, I have a bunch of actors, but I don't have a bunch of actors on the left. That's okay. I don't need to have that. I'm just saying, so I'm trying to figure out the next sequence you've given. What is that?
I'm talking about these narratives that are coming out now. They're themes.
Okay. And so the last one I had is anti-health authoritarianism as their test of authoritarianism. See if they can get away with it, right?
Wait, that's a via positiva. It's not an anti. Health authoritarianism as a justification for actually dominating by diktat the public. It's anti-populism. It's health authoritarianism.
Mm-hmm.
So she said she calls it the use of the health infrastructure to justify the control apparatus. And she calls there's two resets being discussed on the left, which is the going direct reset, which is the wholesale version of it from the bankers in New York. And then the great reset is Klaus Schwab is the marketing department for retail sales of it to the public.
Okay, if you haven't got more, I want to dive into those two.
Okay, I've got a lot more. I just, like I say, I've been busy, and
Let's just
squash that information together was not easy. And I'm happy to let you participate at any time.
Well, I don't want to try to keep it all in my head.
Well, that's good. That's fair. That's fair.
Go ahead.
No, so it's like that. But the issue is this: is the rising theme appears to be this national divorce premise that is like the only peaceful way out.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fact is, the rule of law has been abused by the left and the authoritarians, and it is continuing to be abused by the left to squash the populist revolt at that premise. And so it's like that's the last civil play we have.
Well, it's just interesting. If you let me comment for a second, or do you want to go? Okay, so we take the paternal version of we're the government. Anybody who wants to move forward legislation, regulation, has to convince a concurrent majorities of the classes and regions. And so, in other words, you have to convince people of it. And the conservative view is, if it's true, people will eventually move to it. And then it will be enacted concurrently and be settled law. The paternal, motherly, authoritarian version of it is that we need to do it right now because every day matters, right? Because they're short-term thinkers. And we need to impose this upon you, and you will recognize eventually that it's a good. Except that this doesn't happen, right? It doesn't happen. It only happens if the people come to its conclusion. Like the abortion game, we shouldn't have imposed abortion. We should have left it to the states. What would have happened? Eventually, pretty much all the states, except for a few outliers, would have put abortion in place, and it would have become settled law. But as a matter of the Constitution, it's not settled law. In other words, there's no need to settle natural law because it is settled. I mean, nature settled it for us, right? Anything on top of natural law is then a matter of concurrency, right? If it's legislation, and commonality if it's dispute resolution. And hopefully those two things converge, right? You identify a dispute that we resolve in court, and then you codify that identification as legislation. In other words, you create a standard of weight and measure because empirically you've discovered it. It's true. So the problem with the left is this impatient, maternal, caretaking, authoritarian, magical thinking, utopianism that says it'll all work out, but it doesn't work out. It actually violates the first principle of the natural law the Constitution is based on. In other words, you can do anything if you convince everybody of it that it's good, because that's empirical. But there's no authoritarianism permitted under natural law, the England model, or especially the American model. As I can't remember who said this the other day, but America is the most European civilization that's ever existed in the context of that Constitution. It's the most European Constitution. It's ever the highest expression of Europeanism because it's closest to the natural law. Matter of fact, as we say, we've done the work. There's basically 8 holes in it.
Right.
I was going to ask me one of these days to recite them. I don't think I can recite them off the top of my head without referring to them. But I know some of them, but I can't do all 8 of them.
Okay.
And 2 of them are process oriented, and the rest are largely a failure to sufficiently codify natural law, which was right the premises of natural law that are in Blackstone forward, and stated as science instead of divine imposition.
Right.
So in that sense, all I'm really getting to is that we're empirical and they're ideological, right? And that's the real difference. And why is that? The feminine in time because of the fragility of children, and the masculine over time because of the durability of the polity. So these are just monkeys, right? It's monkey material back there working. The problem is when you scale anything, it turns out conservatives are right. When you scale down anything, it turns out that the feminine is right? I mean, exhaustive forgiveness is a very feminine trait given to her children, right? That's where it comes from, the mother. So, but, it doesn't scale up because we have the opposite problem of a mother's trying to get a child to adulthood, and we're trying to get a youth or an adult into responsibility.
Right.
And these are 2 different sectors. So, my argument is that we can either develop separate houses for the masculine and feminine, which I'll tell you why that's difficult, or we can just separate and do it by voluntary sortition. And the reason we can't do it is I can't judge your intersexual bias, like your cognitive frame. I mean, I can, but I mean, it's hard to do it as demonstrated preference other than voting, right? You could test somebody for it and they'll lie, right? I mean, so the only way to do it is to say, well, I mean, if you vote enough times this direction, then you belong to the left wing house, and if this, as long as the houses agree, you can do anything. Just like in marriage, why one family, one vote, which is one man, one vote, was one family, one vote, made
Right.
sense. But we can create a house for men and a house for women, right?
Okay.
And we can eliminate the ability we can equally suppress the female ability to engage in false promise, seduction, magical thinking, whatever. We can require empiricism in any law. We can greater codify our law, as I have, so that they can't do their games, right? Baiting is into hazard, right? Right. We can do that. And then we can separate the houses of men and women. And then we can forward trade between the sexes, because that's what happens the minute you put the sexes together. Instead of one family, one vote, you get one person, one vote. Now you've got to have a means of providing, understand, concurrency between them. Both have to agree to make it happen. Well, I mean, if we did that, none of this would happen, because men would never agree to some of this stuff, but some of this stuff, and then women would be in the position of having to produce trades, which would make them think rationally instead of emotionally. So it's not that we can't solve this problem, it's that there's two ways of solving it. We either go to sex-based houses, right, at the grand scale, or we go to in other words, polities, go to sex-based houses and outlaw leftism entirely, or we go to, which is lying, or if we go to, well, because it is
so rude.
It's just true. It's just lying. But mothers have to lie. I mean, this is the thing about women. You understand why a woman has such heightened fear, right? She's got a prey response for good biological reasons.
Yes.
Right. But that same thing causes her to have to magically think in order to maintain the will to persist. It's the women's ability to magically think is the same as the guy looking in the mirror and sucking in his gut and saying, I'm fucking Conan, right? I mean, it's just that our method doesn't go beyond the interpersonal, right? But theirs, they take it from the interpersonal, try to scale it to the political.
They can't imagine a limit on it.
Right. So because they can't systematize, they can only empathize. And so real, again, it's a distribution. Don't,
Right.
axalt here. But so it's not that both sexes don't magically think. Magical thinking is necessary. We evolved this way because, frankly, the universe is a scary, fucking, hostile, mean, awful place, right? But we still have to have the will to move, right? And so women have to have the will to take care, despite the fact that any rational being would take the child and throw it in the river, like we do with a bag of cats, right? Because it's a noisy, annoying, expensive, costly, irritating thing that takes years to grow up. Right. So why wouldn't you just throw it in the river? Right. So women need this behavior. So we can't say it's like, all we can do is
pathological.
right. We have to just say we have to constrain behaviors to the sphere of their capacity, right, what they're capable of. And so you have to constrain women's behavior, female behavior, the way we've constrained males. So we can either separate and let competition do it in markets for polities, in which case you'll have more shithole cities that continue to decline into favelas, which at some point we'll have to clean up.
Right.
But we keep the left out of the rest of the country.
Yeah.
Because we raise the standard of behavior such by law, in other words, by constitution, so it's not overcomable by legislation. We raise that capacity so this behavior isn't allowable, and therefore people who are dysfunctional will continue to self-sort into these urban shitholes. Right. Whereas, or we could say, let's take responsibility for the busted people. Let's separate let's institute a law for everybody, and let's separate the male and female. And going forward, let's require an exchange between the sexes for anything to happen. And that restores the utility of one family, one vote, which is the compromise between the sexes. And we should be in pretty good condition, because you would have the sex differences not adding, because otherwise what you get is is you get white women defecting, which destroys everything. Everybody else votes by race, right? The only people who don't vote by race are white women, and it's only because they're herd followers. They're herd followers with the magical thing, and they find virtue in the victimhood. So, once you've gotten away from Freudian psychology and into the theory of incentives of acquisition and the sex differences in the brain, human behavior is really quite simple, as we illustrate here on a daily basis. I talked to my friend who's a psychologist, and she says, well, the problem for them is they're trying to fix broken people. We're trying to prevent people from being broken. And she says, so the difference here is that we're trying to create institutions which minimize the chance you'll be broken, minimize the chance that you'll need to get broken, right, in order to be happy, and provide you with the training necessary so that you don't become broken. And the problem with psychology is they're trying to figure out where you're broken. The problem is they don't tie it back to physics.
No,
they don't tie it back to, well, I mean, forgive yourself. It's fucking biology. Of course you're going to feel that way, right? They say forgive yourself because it's normal. Well, normal doesn't tell you anything, right?
That's a weird thing. People ask me that question all the time.
What's normal?
They ask me what's the norm? Is it what's normal for this condition? I go, it doesn't mean anything in the context of the question. The question is meaningless.
Yes. So you gotta understand. So what? Let's think about. Can I carry this forward one more step? You're running with that?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm good.
No. I thought you had something else to say, and I didn't want to cut you off if you did. No. So hope did I just talk myself out of it? Okay. So what happens now is that women have got into the ability to enjoy the economy and and political influence, but they haven't carried the responsibility of the social burden of maintaining the commons, the behavioral commons. They actually avoid that responsibility at all costs. So we're asking women to do something that's quite hard for them, unless we create an environment where they'd feel safe policing the commons. In other words, do you understand? It's not. I feel safe policing the commons. I'm a man. What the fuck you fight me over this, right?
It's like, yeah, that's funny because that is kind of how it is. Like, okay, then
let's not have a fight over this. And I was like, okay, well, I don't give a shit enough about the fact that this guy insulted me to have a fight about it. That's really what it comes down to, right? I care, but I don't care enough. I demonstrated my displeasure by threatening him, and you guys broke it up, and now we're like even, right? I mean, that's okay, right? That's how we resolve things. Well, women are terrified of that environment, right? Well, according to the video stuff, especially the stuff on what is it, World Star, the lower class, especially black women, don't have a problem with.
Oh my God!
They don't have a problem with.
Oh my God! It's like watching these brawls occurring in the public space. It's like, holy crap! Like it is. It's absolutely. It's like So it's like
Yes, right. So it's a class and IQ issue, obviously, but class IQ self-regulation issue. But in any event, so women in general, the kind of women we're talking about who vote, and they're afraid. They're women live in a world that's more fearful than men.
They're not going to. The issue it goes to this is like it goes to imperial, authoritarian creation of self-governing favelas that are not policed.
Right. They're trying to make it so that that not only are women not policed for their bad behavior, but that women don't need to police each other or men, for that matter, for their.
And it ends up being the Middle East.
And thank you. Thank you. Now, did you get there? When did you get there? I'm teasing you, right? I'm baiting you. I'm trying to bait you so you'll play the audience, right?
Oh,
But
it's
that's
like,
the whole point.
but
The
it's like the
feminine
issue
is
is
the
the
Middle
women. The
East.
women will be stuck in their house and
Yes.
following orders from their husband.
Right. Because that's the end
That's
result.
where it goes.
Right. So, but that's the whole thing. That's where it ends up.
In the favelas, and it's like, if we choose to separate geographically,
We get favela. So this is the question. Do you
they
want to
get
deal with
favelas. We don't get anything like that.
No, we don't get favelas because our
They
standard of
get
behavior is
favelas.
too high, You could think of favelas as basically the prison colonies,
It is.
right? That's what it is, right? It's a prison colony for people with bad genetics or bad behavior. So you say, okay, well, do we want to have favelas, right? The prison colonies, or shithole cities, or do we want, because they're just going to continue to get worse, right? Detroit is the model.
Just like it doesn't qualify because they all left.
Well, I mean,
Everybody left.
Well, I mean, but not all of them left. The people that mattered left. Right? It's like I always tease Connecticut. Nobody's here except the people who can't get out.
Oh
Right?
my.
The only people in Connecticut that matter are the people in Fairfield County, which is driving distance from New York City for work. Right? That's where all the money comes from. Everybody else in the rest of the state who can leave has. Right. Every business is left, every person is left. There's like net migration out. Why? Well, because Connecticut's the state that most copied the Soviets after Massachusetts and California. The difference is Massachusetts had a course correction when the tech sector moved out, and so they corrected when they lost the tech sector to the Silicon Valley, right? They had a crash, and they said, "Oh shit, we got to do something," right? And then what happened in Connecticut is it happened gradually. Everybody just keeps leaving, but it wasn't a crash. And so, look at Baltimore. Baltimore could have been the capital of the country, right? It should have been seaport, whatever, but turned into a shithole. New York could have been the capital of the country, turned into a shithole.
Philadelphia
Philadelphia's turned into a shit. So these are all shitholes. So what's dying is the shithole cities. Well, why? Because democracy does not allow you.
Chicago this week.
Right.
Just they elected a new crazy socialist.
Socialist, yeah. Well, actually, he's a communist, really. Yeah. What?
Like I distinguish.
Right. I mean, sorry. Well, he's outright. So I mean, and is it okay to make a prison colony a commune? I guess.
Wait, say that again.
Think of it this way: is it okay to make a prison colony a commune?
Okay.
All right. So
it's okay. I don't
like
care.
Escape
it's
from
not
New
mine.
York.
I'm not claiming responsibility for any of it.
But this is the question I'm asking. I'm like, do we want to take responsibility for domesticating these people? Right.
That's it. Because it's like, okay, this is. I'm gonna.
Let me just finish the arc. Domesticate these people almost. Or do we want to separate and isolate them and let them take responsibility for themselves, despite the fact that we're still going to have to be responsible for them because they're not responsible. Now, the difference is you have a prison colony to send people to this way. The other way is if we take control and raise the standard, people will leave the country. They'll have to leave the country. Now, I prefer that they leave the country.
Wait. See, this goes to Connecticut.
Yeah.
Which is everybody that can did. They can't. Oh, they would. But where are they going to go? Turn them into expatriates is probably preferable.
Canada loves them. Canada's on the.
But I like the kick in the can problem. That's kicking the can.
Well, so that's what I'm asking. Do you want to solve the problem, which is take responsibility for them, or right, and just deal with it? Deal with the fact that these cities need to be domesticated, or do we say, all right, well, we can't, it's too much work, it's no benefit, get them out of the fucking gene pool. And go the European model of city states, right, and states, and basically, use borders to keep them out. And say, okay, well, what'll happen, of course, there'll be net in migration of some people into the favelas, right, the future favelas, and there'll be continued net migration out. That's why I posted that article this morning, that thing this morning, which is, it was really called them, I called them shithole cities. And I went from, the West Coast clockwise around the country, and I just said, where are people moving out of? Well, they're moving out of immigrant, cosmopolitan immigrant shithole cities. And where are they moving to? They're moving to white Christian redneck territories.
Everybody wants to live near those guys.
Yeah, well, because they're civilized, right? So
it's generally recognized to be true.
Yes.
Regardless of race, people prefer to live with them.
Yes. Well, the problem is that you have the locus effect, right? Which is that they come and they bring their cancer with them. So now you have to guard against the locust effect. How do you do that? You have to preemptively raise your constitution, right? Change your state constitution to prohibit the locust effect. In other words, if you come here, you can't vote in anything local for 30 years or something like that. And, or especially if you come from a blue state, I don't know, something, right? And then the second thing is that, can't vote anything local for that period of time. And, the standard of behavior is such that we have, was that sheriff in Polk County? Oh, I love that fucking guy.
What did he do?
He is saying, no, I'm going to tell you, if you make it, you're a danger to the people, I want you to understand we are going to shoot you.
That's what the county attorney in my county, when the BLM protesters came to a local town, they were met by mounted riflemen who told them not to get out of the bus.
Yes.
And they called the county attorney up and complained, and he said, "Oh, come on up here to Globe.
Yeah.
We'll surround you and beat you up." He goes, and if anybody shoots you because you're going on their property, it's not a crime.
Yes. Yes.
And it's like they just drove away.
Yeah, of course.
Like there's just unfriendly territory.
So we need a little more. We need some more of that. So we need to put these constitutional movements in place before the locus effect makes it impossible to do so. And so our goal, of course, is to do it at the federal level. But there's no reason that people couldn't enact these constitutional reforms at local level. Right? It's the same thing, right? I mean, it's the Constitution's the Constitution. Right? Just go through there and say, this is what we're doing.
Okay. So it is the choice, there's a choice here, which is, and it comes down to what is possible by peaceful means. How do we accomplish the objective of neutralizing the authoritarian interests of the left to preserve the proper balanced government of our locality?
And I think we've just said it, right? We can enact it at the state level. We can enact it at the federal level. Or we can separate and enact it at the federal or state level. Right? So you can have your free cities, which is what we did in Europe. Right? You can have your free cities, which means you can be licentious if you want. But
this reminds me of the solution, the meme that I've picked up upon that I find amusing is Weimar problems generate Weimar solutions. So
just if it's possible to say it, describe what a Weimar solution is.
I'm afraid to. Weimar solutions is dissolution of the state, and authoritarian right-wing people come in and tell you how it's going to be.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that was not.
Is that not clear enough? Is it
That
saying
it was clear. I wanted to make sure it was clear enough so that we didn't have a misunderstanding that it was about inflation or something. Because an economist,
inflation is just part of the Weimar problem,
it's just that when an economist hears Weimar, he just hears inflation.
right? That's early Weimar.
Yeah. It's really Weimar. So in the end,
Well, man, it's late Weimar, I guess. The ultimate Weimar solution was the election of the Nazis, which led to the dissolution of the Weimar Republic.
yeah, well, we're going to go through an economic change here, right?
Yes.
It's happening now, and you remember people. It could be a short recession. Then they went to a depression is one that a recession lasts for 3 years, right, into the third year. And now we have people coming out and saying the truth, which it's going to be at least 5 years. So I saw that happen over the past few weeks. Now
Really?
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. I can tell
Depression?
it has to be. It has to be because excuse me, listen. Without a drastic change in the world order, it has to be. In other words, we're not. There is no way to avoid a depression, or some equivalent of that lasts quite a long, on the 5 to 10 year period, because it's going to take us that long to go from globalism to autarky, right? I mean, it's going to take that long. So for Americans, it's going to be good, but for us, it's going to be watching things get, rapid inflation, which is going to hurt a lot of people at the bottom, and they're going to demand a solution. And the second thing that's going to happen is going to take us a while to reindustrialize and get all that strategic stuff back here. Meanwhile, there's going to be fucking wars everywhere.
Well, this is the interesting thing. The feminine energy is trying to drive us to a global war now that will maintain and cement their social status into place where they get to stay in charge.
Can I just switch that to the credentialists are seeking to maintain their position, power, influence, and social status.
Yes.
And their security, basically. And those credentials happen to have adopted the female.
They're in the feminine. That's the feminine
strategy, right? I just want to separate the two things, which is, they are in the strategy and they have this incentive, and it's the combination of those two things that's pretty freaking horrible. So yeah.
Is that PFH?
Yeah.
Wait. Well, it's like that's who we're conflicted with here, is, in my opinion. It's that group of authoritarian elite that are by virtue of position and not by virtue of competence.
Mm-hmm.
It's just position. The fact is the leftists won their march through the institutions. It's the victory of my little friend from Italy. What's his name? My apologies for having forgotten his name.
I could have done it until you said our 4'11" hunchbacked friend from Italy. Why is it escaping me?
Begins with the G.
God damn it! I hate this. It gets on the tip of your tongue. You can't.
That's how important he is.
Oh
my!
The midget hunch.
He's looking it up. Good job, Curt.
Originator of neo-Marxism.
Cultural hegemony. Oh my! Wow, I'm racing you.
No, it's I'll find it. It's like Gramsci. Thank you.
Yeah, There you go. Thank you, sir, for closing
Why
that.
that has
There was a neuronal searching loop going on. It's like, oh, this sucks, man.
I don't know why, because you know,
Gromsky's the victory
well, I mean,
of Gromsky.
just to explain why is that the verbal mind is not compartmentalized, right? I mean, the systemic mind is compartmentalized. So if like we open a drawer, I mean, it's like I don't know what's in the other drawers right now. I have to close this drawer where I go into that one, and that's in a different drawer. I mean, wait a minute. If we go back to talking about the Marxist sequence, I'll think of Gramsci all day long, and
That's
you know
right.
all the rest of them. But I mean,
that's right. We're operating. It's just
the wrong drawer. I can't go from that drawer to that drawer that easy.
So it is. It's, you have to say something like curse him because of his victory. It's like his system was very flawlessly employed by relentless underminers.
Well, he had a reason to hate the world, right? He's 4'11", he's hunchbacked. He's pretty much an outcast.
And Benito Mussolini threw him in jail till he died. Let him write. Oops. Anyway, so that's the issue.
Hard to hang. It's a little bit hard to hang public intellectuals because they can always recant. And so what you want to do is you want to have them self-falsify. The problem is not all of them recant. Some of them just keep producing their shit.
Right.
So
it is so the issue is this, in my opinion, is that the fragmentation of the elite into the leftists and the ones on the right, and it's based on competency and truthfulness, and the other side isn't.
Right, that's the net result, right? Is that it's based on
which is interesting.
Competency, meritocracy, demonstrated competency, meritocracy, which is the same thing. Demonstrate is the high end of demonstrated. Truth and truth before face, and that's because we are male and we're willing to bear the burden of defense of the commons. So, and the female mind is not willing to bear the burden of defense of commons. Now we call this trait agreeableness and disagreeableness, right? We call this. So some of us are just more willing. I know I am. I mean, I get it all the time. You call me one disagreeable curse word after another. So it's okay, you can say in public. Say it privately all the time. So
for the audience, like, what is amazing is that Curt, as disagreeable as he is the most gregarious person that you'll ever meet.
Yes.
Unnervingly so. I apologize for having that little diversion, but I need the audience to understand how paradoxical it seems.
I can love you, but I don't have to put up with it. Somebody's got to be responsible in this room, you know, somebody. So in any event, the net result is it's reasonable for the female mind who lives in fear, amplified by neuroticism and biased toward agreeableness, right? It's reasonable for that mind to say, I want to avoid policing the behavioral commons,
right?
Unless it's my kids, right?
Right.
I have authority. It's reasonable to expect that behavior. What's not reasonable is to expect them to be rational like men. It's not reasonable to expect that, and so we've been unreasonable, right? We've been the Enlightenment utopianism is a bit ridiculous.
That was some kind of crazy pipe dream.
Yeah, and it's only gotten worse. It's like, well, the monarchy, the aristocracy is bad and the middle class is better. No, the aristocracy is bad where it's bad. It's good where it's good. The middle class, then the Marxists come along. The middle class is bad and the laboring class is better. And you're like, no, the middle class is good where it's good and bad where it's bad.
Right.
And then we come, the feminine comes along and says, well, men are bad, working class, the middle class, men are bad, and we're better. He says, well, no, men are good where they're good and they're bad where they're bad, right? And then we're coming along and completing the circle as responsible aristocracy, basically meaning people who actually make judgments, as we're saying, actually, no, women are bad where they're good and they're bad where they're bad.
No,
And
they're
basically,
evil where they're bad.
yeah, they're evil where they're bad. That's even better. And it turns out women's evil is worse than men's bad. So what does this mean? Well, it's like we're all good and bad in our own capacities at our own scales, and we try to limit each other to the good, and that works out pretty well. But then the feminists say women should be allowed to be bad, although they think it's being virtuous. Well, Marxists come along and say the working classes should be allowed to be bad, even though that's evidently not the case. The middle class comes along and says we should be allowed to be bad, and that turns out to be wrong. And the aristocracy comes along and says we should be allowed to be bad, and no. So it's this fucking game we're all playing. But the answer is natural law says we're all good and bad, and what our responsibility is to compensate for each other's failings. In other words, tendency to be bad, or in a women's case, evil.
Right.
That's so right. I mean, it's not. It's just we're just. If you have a pyramid of agency, right, is a very small pyramid, or it's a very steep pyramid, right?
Yeah.
So you have like Indo-European warrior class with their bronze and horse and wheel and their clan to finance it all, and right, you can't fuck with that, right? So, and then you call on conquer your bitches and whatever, and take over, you kill your guys and take over your bitches and whatever. I'm trying to use vulgar language on purpose, but you know what I mean. And so, but after a while, the pyramid gets a bigger base because you're building the. Right? And so it looks like the people are still on top and the bottom, but the difference is actually not very much. I mean, you look at the difference between a middle class person today and royalty in the medieval era. It's not even there's no comparison. I mean, you look at some of these Russian billionaires, right? And they're fucking mega yachts and money, whatever. I mean, there's no, and this is fucking Roman. You could go back to Rome to make that happen. I mean, and then you got to go to, you know, there's you get to China. We don't even know what the numbers are in China. Right, but I mean, it's getting pretty close to what's that guy? The African guy in I want to say Tusi. I can't think of his name. The African guy who was in charge of the gold, who owned the gold mines.
Rhodes?
No. It's an African. It's like Meyer Tusi or something like that. I can't.
Okay.
It's not coming to me. Well, I mean, Gramsci didn't come to me. This isn't coming to me. So I mean, next thing I know, Hayek won't come to me, and then I'll know it's time for bed. So anyway,
that's all right.
Anyway, so you know, this huge pyramid is happening. So my whole point is, it's rational that women the majority of women and that minority of men with the feminine mind would behave this way.
Yes, it's expected.
It's expected, right? It's not rational to expect them to be otherwise.
They can't do it.
And we have created this enlightenment sequence that's worked its way through the classes, which I just artfully, humorously covered. It's artfully worked for its classes as a bunch of utopian nonsense. What it does, though, is this utopian nonsense does allow us to integrate somebody and then outlaw their bads.
That's right.
It's sort of like Christianity. Christianity says you all have the capacity to be good. Well, that's fucking bullshit. But anyway, it turns out that if you give people the chance, right, by exhaustive forgiveness, most of them will find greater value in joining the good than the bad. Most. So is the both. So there is the Aryanism, which is aristocratic egalitarianism, which is we need more of us, always need more of us at the top, which is the same thing as the middle class. We always need more of us in the middle class. Well, Christianity says we always need more of us in the bottom class. We always need more virtuous people across the spectrum. Right. So this we see this playing out as the combination of Aryanism and Christianity, in the Enlightenment phase, right? But it's not instead of being a deliberate statement of, well, we're economically viable enough to include these people in economy and polity. So now how do we enfranchise them in order to obtain their loyalty? That's what it's all about. We want loyalty.
Right.
So you say, okay, how do we get their loyalty? Well, I mean, instead of saying that, we go out and say all people are fucking equal. Well, that is just absolute nonsense. Instead, we need to continuously enfranchise people as they're able to expect responsibility by inculcating them into their disciplines of responsibility. And so we created this freaking religious.
So this is interesting. So I want to encapsulate this a little bit. It's very good. So I see this among historians. They try to name the new epoch or whatever, and the naming epochs of human development or historical development.
Yes.
And so what you're suggesting is, to me, is the post-Enlightenment phase of Western civilization.
Correct.
That's what we're entering into, because now we can understand and properly integrate human behavior and into our science and understand what's going on, and then speak about it in a way that was impossible during the Enlightenment, which caused the errors that we're now conflicted with.
Correct. I would agree with that. I would tend to view, however, it as post-agrarianism. That's how I think of it. Is that no, hold on. Okay. And Enlightenment is a phase in the post-agrarian transmission.
It's the first half.
Correct.
Okay, that's fair enough.
And so the second half is, okay, now what do we do about it as we transition, which is what we work on.
Okay, so we call this the phase we're working on is post-Enlightenment history, development, civilizational development.
Because, we forget that the hunter-gatherer world is actually pretty violent between groups, but in group, it's pretty comforting.
Right.
So agrarianism created the ability for huge disparities in people, right, of all kinds. Industrialism reduced the ability of huge disparities for all kinds. And so we have a pretty big shift here going on. So we created an environment where very few people could be or were able to be in the agrarian model, primarily because of difficulties of loyalty, because of difficulties of scarcity, imposing costs on the chance of loyalty. But today, we have people who want to be loyal to to something that's more attuned to their specific interests rather than their survival. So they're looking for loyalties to their fulfillments rather than loyalties to their survivals. The problem is their fulfillment might be correspondent with reality or non-correspondent with reality. And the problem is we aren't limiting people to the fulfillments that are correspondent with the reality, and therefore they're exporting their harms of the false promise of non-correspondence with reality, right, onto those people who are correspondent with reality.
What they're attempting to do to maintain their social status is to sell the lie.
Yes. Well, I just said what they're trying to do. You said how they're trying to do it, which is by lying. The difference between it is, of course, there's two things that I learned when I'm talking to the staff, everybody in the institute, right? Is that first of all, I'm a little bit foolishly optimistic.
How so?
Because you guys are always making fun of me about my belief in the possible goodhood of man, good nature of man, or something of that nature, or that people will come around or they'll learn. And I have to agree that you're probably right, but I'm going to prefer my delusion.
Okay.
I forgot the second one now. I forgot
what you learned by talking to the guys. Okay.
Is that
you're overly optimistic?
I'm overly optimistic. But I forgot now There were 2 points I was going to make. I'm overly optimistic, and what's the other one? I don't know. I forgot what I was talking about.
Dealing with the guys.
I'll think of, well, I'll watch the video. I'll think of it. I don't think I'll do a
There you
voiceover.
go. That's okay.
So here's my moment of silence for the voiceover. Okay, now hopefully the voiceover will fix that.
Hopefully it's long enough.
Jesus.
Oh my. That's exciting. I'm gonna have to watch it just to see what goes in there. But I thought that was pretty useful. The distinction of historical trend, like epochs, agrarianism, post-agrarianism, including the Enlightenment, including the industrialism and the post-Enlightenment phases.
Right. So to think of it as we have to organize around different. We have to organize. We are capable. I mean, the whole thing about humans is we've specialized in our adaptive specialization is adaptation itself. That's the value of the brain, right? So we can adapt in general. So we have to adapt how we organize ourselves, which is the myths and stories and values and shit we do, right? We have to organize that based on what our real circumstances are. You know, the Marxists were saying forever, and the feminists in particular, that, you know, agrarianism allowed us to have a lot of people, but it wasn't exactly a net improvement in human happiness by any measure.
Oh,
You know, we look back on it with a lot of admiration, and some of us, frankly, would prefer to live agrarian village life. It's pretty useful as long as there's a city out there that's manufacturing our tools for us. It turns out
right.
that the late medieval period, you know, excuse me, the early modern period has started to be a pretty good place. But the minute you get the industrial evolution, it starts to get awesome. The problem is at that point, the social order the social, economic, and political order has to adapt because the ideas have to adapt. And one of the things we're trying to do is, as the economy increases, you're trying to increase the people who are participate in loyalty networks. Now we call this nationalism or whatever. You can globalism is the herd version of it. You're trying to create a loyalty network. And so as we create this loyalty, that we bring people up, we call them enfranchisement, which is we pay them with rights and privileges, and now in exchange for participating in loyalty, and loyalty requires responsibility. So if we articulated what we were doing, like I am, right, then it would be a very clear thing, right? But if we articulate it as religion, which is what we did, because that's where we were religious people for a long time. So we articulate as religion or morality instead of basically science, or the science of human cooperation. If we do it that way, then the people don't understand. They just take it for granted that this is like a metaphysical thing, right? That this is and this is where these oppression narratives come from. They come from saying, well, I mean, is it oppression? You get to have these rights and privileges if you take on these responsibilities. Well, it was okay as we're incrementally adding groups of men with different agency to it. The minute we added women, though, right, we added people with a very opposite agency, a much lesser ability to maintain truth before face, right? Basically heroism. Women are less likely to be able to preserve heroism because they're less likely to bear the cost of the commons over the self. They're less likely to engage in those things that would cause conflict, which would expose them to risk. Why? Because they're more dependent on social, and they're more aware of social interaction, social status, and social signaling. So it's like having a different set of taste buds. They're more sensitive to this particular thing, and so they avoid it more durably. So we didn't tell women that this was going to be a problem for them. We didn't provide institutional education for them, and we didn't provide institutional processes for limiting the problem. And well, frankly, we didn't give them the option to opt out of it. So What's happened, of course, is that you get females undermining the adversarial, competitive, innovative strategy of every human organization possible that they can get into. And so basically any profession that becomes predominantly female loses its competitive advantage.
Okay.
Unless there's a sufficient number of males doing the fundamental research that contributes to it. So that's why, anyway.
This is good. This goes to some, I'm going to circle back a little bit just because it ties this together nicely. Is that we see this operationally in the collusion between governmental agencies and the corporate world to project narratives into the public that are false.
Correct. They're actually harmful.
And to regulate restrict the speech of people who don't agree.
Well, what we're doing is we're saying you people, all of you, women and immigrants, you don't any longer have to pay the high price of integrating into whiteness, which is heroism, which is bearing all those burdens. And women don't want to bear them. So what women see, being told that you must bear this burden of responsibility as oppression. Well, it is oppression to them because it's harder for them to self-regulate their emotions. It's harder for them to produce mindfulness, right? And secondly, the weapon they have to coerce people isn't direct challenge, it's social undermining, gossiping, rallying, shaming. So what they're actually doing is their means of correcting people is actually destroying the thing we're trying to produce, right? Where we want people to be aggressive in prosecution of norms, traditions, and values that basically maximize responsibility. Well, women want to minimize responsibility. They want to escape all responsibility if possible.
Now, so the correction, the feminine corporate the functionality of this that we recognize is the attempt to monopolize the industries that are being destroyed by their behavior.
Yes.
So they end up with this ESG, corporate collusion, monopolistic practice is the intentionality of the feminine authoritarian output is desiring that ESG monopoly.
Right, and they don't do it. They do it by undermining and threats of undermining because they're threatening you if you don't do it. With gossiping, rallying, shaming, undermining, canceling. Whereas what they're not doing is they're saying we're providing a competitive advantage. They're not coming out and going to the market with we're openly having a discourse, right, that would pass the tests of commonality and concurrency, naturality, commonality, and concurrency, right? Natural law, naturality, commonality, and concurrency. They're saying we're not able to do that because we're lying.
That's what we do.
And that's what they do, right? They lie and deny, they undermine. So everything they do is seduction into a false promise by threat of ostracization. What they're not doing is bringing something into the legislative model. So in the old world terms, in other words, the pre constitutional terms, what they're doing is they're violating the rule that the law, the common law, that you're able to engage in debate, duel, and court. Those are your three. It was probably debate, court, and duel, but it's debate, duel, and court. You're able to do those things in order to settle differences. But what you're not able to do is circumvent the legislature. In other words, you're not allowed to engage in gossiping, rallying, shaming, undermining, and canceling. Because that's sedition. It's not honorable. It's not heroic. You're not having an open, transparent discussion. You're having a seditious, treasonous conflict.
So that we can neutralize that. There's a problem. The problem is that we've incorporated them into polity, and we haven't adequately neutralized this behavior. And it's like the creation of a women's house and a men's house would do that, would resolve that problem, because now it will be within their own house. They can have these discussions and talk about it any way they want.
Yes.
I like that. That seems to be the best answer to me.
It's the best answer for me if we want to take responsibility for them. I'm willing to do that. Right? I'm willing to do that. I think none of us are willing. But how do we get to the point where we have the power to enact that, given the fact that the deep state is the elite matrix that you've talked about is actually the problem, right? And they're the problem because they aren't respecting commonality and concurrency. They're driving toward
dictatorial
right
problem.
So what they should say is, if we have to be dictators, we have the wrong people enfranchised. If we, in other words, right. So if we have to be dictators, we're saying people either one of two things: either we're wrong, or we have people enfranchised who can't understand. Right, and so and the answer is people who have shared responsibility have common interests. People who have shared irresponsibility have no common interest. Does that make sense to you? Right. So
I do understand that.
Right. So the more responsibility you have, the more responsibility you want from others. Right. And so the elites basically want authority because they lack the ability to persuade, because what they're persuading is wrong. And even despite the fact that they have too many people to persuade.
Right. The issue is look, I would view it in a different way, which is this is a Spartacus problem. It's a slave revolt being led by a hostile elite from inside our institutions of cultural production.
Well, it's a religious. Think of it as a religious conversion for the purpose of destroying the state. Yes.
So that seems to me this. I suggest this solution set, which is it's necessary to create the house of men that will decide how to solve the problem.
Yes.
That's all. We create the house of men that are interested in solving the problem of our rebellious faction.
Otherwise, we're going to have a rebelgency and crusade and solve it that way.
That's the other way.
Yeah.
It's very unpleasant, all of it.
I don't want to do that. I'm of the opinion that it's 10% of people that are a problem, right? And everybody else, I mean, because women are so easily malleable and misled by this stuff.
That's right.
It's just right. It's really 10% of the people are a problem, and the fact that women are so easily misled. And it's just that whose fault is that? It's ours for introducing women into the economy and polity without adequately updating the law to prevent the female means of the natural female means of responsibility, evasion, sedition, and treason. I mean, that's their method.
No, just for your edification, is having done this now, this is approximately 2 years into this game with you. It took me a year to become sufficiently fluent to have a decent discussion, in my opinion. And it's like, but it's still steeping in the conversation to realize the effectiveness of the science to explain. It's hard to wrap your head around.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a minute for it to soak in, because it is like, it's just, oh my, stunningly obvious thoughts, simple, not hard to understand. And it just takes time.
And
to exercise those connections, right?
Yeah, because you're rewriting connections, right? I mean, it'd be one thing if we taught people from an early age in science, right? They'd just see the world as it is. You would make sense. I mean, Remember the first time I got trained in, I was trained in, my company trained everybody in personality profiling, right? I mean, it was just part of thing, everything, every manager, for some reason, Elliot decided we all needed to do it. So we all did it. And like, holy shit, the world makes a lot more sense this way. Right. When you can profile someone's personality by listening to them. And it's just, and today we do it. The way I learned was just 4 dimensions, right? I mean, it's a pretty simple version, but it's the same thing as the big 5 or the big 6, right? It's just slightly different way of framing the problem, but it's the same measurements. Extroversion, blame avoidance, which is, neuroticism, right? Extroversion, I don't know what they are now, but anyway, it's just basically 4 basic traits. And once you realize that, you're like, oh shit, I can pretty much understand where someone's coming from, especially for an autist. This was really valuable.
Right.
Well, it's the same thing with what we do. It's like, okay, now wait a minute, there's more rules here than personality,
Right.
more dimensions than the big 5, big 6, but damn, it turns out that everything, this triangular model allows us to explain, it gives us a system of measurement for universalizing the question. And it turns out that all of this stuff is really stupidly simple, and people are just largely bots.
But it's really like it, yes. To understand that is hard. But to understand and make use of that as technology, because it's technology, because it allows you to grasp the world and manipulate it to satisfaction. That is you can't understand the value that it adds to without having done it.
Right. It's I always say it's like anything that's formal. Like everybody says, well, everybody understands math because you have to do a lot of math to get good at it. It's mostly about doing a lot of it, right? That's really it, right? It isn't like, I mean, there's some people that just naturally have a bias to do it that way, but mostly it's just about doing a lot of it. Well, same with programming. It doesn't just do a lot of it, right? Well, same thing for the law. You just got to do a lot of it.
So I'm going to go back to this because this helped me understand how to process the information which I presented at the beginning of this session.
Okay.
Because I was trying to, because I'm talking to, or I'm listening to people, a lot of different people who aren't versed in this science.
Yes.
And then I'm trying to process that into what are they telling me and what is the commonality and how do we organize this information from this perspective? And I didn't expect it to turn out like it did, which is there's too many elites and they fragment into 2 groups, one of which is masculine and the other one which is feminine in its functionality. What's interesting is the feminine in their functionality are treating the polity like children.
That's right.
And it's like, and that's all that's happening here. That's just silly.
No, but that's what the problem is. It's really that simple. Now, if you say this to someone who doesn't know the science, they think you're making an analogy. It's not an analogy, it's a description. Right.
So this is the really irritating part. It's just, this is what, when I say to Curt, that's because it sounds so much like English.
Yes, exactly.
They can't, you're using a different sets of logics and grammars than they are prepared to even understand.
Right.
They understand it in their own way and they paint a crayon picture of it in their mind and they think that your opinion is different than their opinion. And it's like, that's not what's occurring here.
We're doing math.
No,
it sounds like English.
We're on the road from Rome. We're now 3 miles. I know we're 3 miles. Not like we're a long way. It's 3 miles. You don't understand. I just read it right there. Oh my, but that's what's funny. So it's the logics and the grammars. And so what they're inventing is religion because they're talking to children.
Yes.
They're attempting to create a religion that is sufficiently acceptable to those people who have such low capacity to
Right.
function, mental capacity, that will follow their nonsense. And because it's not illegal for them to lie to them.
It's right. It's because it's not illegal. We haven't extended the prohibition on fraud from commerce to politics, which is the same thing, because commerce is a market for private consumption, and politics is a market for public production. So, if you can't, that's all it is, just another market. So if you go to market and you're allowed to bring fraud to market, you will find enough people to get in fraud. You'll find co-conspirators. So
Okay.
we have to remove the ability to sell frauds. It's really pretty simple. The thing is, they can't, it's like you'd think that it's not an opinion, right? We're not stating opinions, right? It's just science, right? It's just is. So the problem is they want the ability to lie, cheat, and steal. Right? They want the ability to they want to be the ability to avoid responsibility. I say avoid responsibility, great. Just don't get then you can't participate in in politics, because politics is the production of responsibility. There's no other point for it, the law. And how do you want to frame the law? It's a production of responsibility by the prohibition of irresponsibility.
Right.
What are you responsible for? Self-determination. By self-determined means by sovereignty and demonstrated interest, and reciprocity and display, where indeed, including duty to the commons before self, and truth before face. Right, and it's the same fucking just the excellence thing in there. I always forget to add, but yeah, it's like this is what you did. You have to produce heroism, which is the priority of the commons ahead of the self. But you can't get a lot of these people. They don't want to put the commons ahead of themselves. What they want to do is make other people pay for commons so they don't have to. Which is what females do, right? How can I get men to pay for this? That's what they do.
That doesn't require an answer, does it?
Well,
I'm trying to keep this G-rated.
We know what the answer is.
Trying not to get you another community summons from the
Food?
YouTube people.
Food, puddles, and the other thing. It's just
How hard is this? Oh my. Oh my.
And he says, I've listened. I love how they change in the manosphere, because there's enough women now who have got out on the we got to be responsible kick now that they're starting to build a new group of women who are okay. We got to get this out of control, right? Yeah,
what's fascinating to watch. I do watch that Pearl, Just Pearly.
Yeah, just Pearly thinks.
I like her stuff, and it's like it's fascinating to watch. It's fascinating to watch because the feminine, there's a feminine backlash component, right? Feminine thinking backlash component against these women who are limiting they want to limit the bad behavior of women because it's bad for women.
It's bad for women, right?
And it's like, but the bad behaving women don't want to admit they're being bad, and they're like, they are irresponsible, and they claim that being responsible, so they call people like that Pearly, they call her a pick-me.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think that the bad behaving women are they're just takers.
Well,
does that make sense?
Yeah. There. So, it's like if you're a bar chick, right? Most of these girls are sixes, and they do their fives or sixes, and they do themselves up, right? There's nothing special about them. I always find that interesting. Is there's a silly men's news site called The Chive, right?
Okay.
I'm not advertising this thing, but I just find them a really great example. It used to be that they would show everyday girls like doing silly stuff, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's not porn or anything. It's just titillation, right? And now it's basically a platform for OnlyFans girls, right? What's interesting is the decline in quality of women as in the only because the OnlyFans chicks are usually ugly, right? They don't. I mean, I consider them ugly. So it's the same thing with the girls on Pearl's show. Is that in rare cases there's an attractive one, but mostly they're ordinary women who've heavily invested in self-modification. So I always look at this and I'm like, well, so this is a weird thing going on here. But these women are coming up and they're saying, I'm thinking of another one other than Pearl right now because she's recent, very good. And they're getting increasingly better at it. But I mean, I would look at it as this is freaking awesome for men. You don't get married, you get all the sex you want, you get no responsibility.
No, because it's not awesome. Because it's like what happens is that there'll be you're taking your chances because one of them will spring the trap on you, and you're going to have a kid out of wedlock, and you're going to be still responsible and get the state.
Well, I mean that's a legal thing we can fix, though, right? There's no reason for child support and alimony anymore. It's whoever wants.
That will fix most of the
right.
misbehavior if you tighten the divorce laws up and
right, because there's no if women are earning more than men and they're younger, right? There's no reason for it. So, and if women are in control, there's no reason for it. So the only way to cut that out is to remove the disincentive, which is the parasitic incentive. And if the state wants to subsidize as women, that's fine, but that'll control the amount of money they get. It'll continually suppress it, right? Because they won't let it get out of hand. So that the state will then be forced to constrain women's reproduction like it should, right? So, but in the sense of I was getting to, if you're in the top 10% of guys or 20% of guys, I mean, it's fucking.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's like I'm bored. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I feel like getting laid. Whose number will give me?
Right.
And I had a woman in a bunch of countries there, but it wasn't like I actually liked them. I just couldn't figure out who to get married to, it was one of those things. But it's like some of these guys are it's like some of these girls have body counts in the hundreds, right? And they're fucking ugly. I mean, I'm fucking ugly. So I don't know. So anyway, I was on
the French horn player told me this when he was from a military school. And he told me this German saying, Nachts sind alle Kätze grau, which is at night, all the cats are gray.
Yes. So I was trying to make a point here before I diverted into all this nonsense about the new women coming online. And
yes,
I was saying that it's been interesting to see the change develop as as the market for intersexual relations has crashed. And so I'm kind of interested in how this market goes forward. Though I cannot see the hose going away. I just can't see that happening. I just can't see that happening.
Well, it's an interesting function because it's like this. It's like the issue is this is the it's a supply demand curve function, right? Which is the oversupply leads to the crash because it's the demand will crash because the quality is not high. Does that make sense? And it's like that's what there's a refreshing reverberation away from oversupply to quality over quantity.
Anyway, I feel we're diverging when we had a really good thing going, and I knew I was going to take it in some direction there. We're talking about bicycles are coming up, and I know I was going to tie that back in, and I don't know, for some reason I fucking lost it.
Sorry. Navigational error, huh?
Yeah, well, I don't know what it is.
Okay. So the issue is then it looks to me like it's necessary to organize men into a house of men. Just that's what the men can do. They can organize themselves into a house of men.
Well, I mean, we can do anything if we can get the ability to implement anything. So the problem is we need to be able to organize ourselves sufficient that we can issue a set of moral demands, which we've put together. And then the question from there is which responsibility do you want to take? Do you want to take responsibility for domesticating? Do you want to take the responsibility of separating and isolating? Which responsibility do you want to take? I'm happy to do the well, let's just have a crusade and get rid of them. I'm happy to say let's isolate them and separate. And I'm happy to say, well, I'm happy to fix the law and maintain the polity at the cost of the deep state. In other words, the talking classes and the 10% there, because it's in the benefit of all. I'm happy to do any of those things. I mean, for me, it's really what do the men want to do? I think that's a political decision, which thing you want to do. I think it'd be a lot easier to me. I would say, I don't need to say which one of those things we need to do. I just say we need.
No, that's right. That's right. No, but it's necessary to organize the men sufficiently to cause them to even have the discussion.
Right. So we have to have the discussion over it. Then we have to show up and issue our demands. I think the discussion over it's just a debate over what we want. I mean,
those are the key questions. Please repeat the key questions so that I may write them down in my little notebook.
Do you want to have an Albigensian crusade, which is to make them go away one way or the other, right? Do you want to, which is a purge, right? Do you want to create a system where we take responsibility for them, which is that we just say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to make them sexist houses the sexist, and we're going to implement the laws, and then therefore we're going to domesticate the undomesticated, and though we're going to have some free cities here so they can go to. Or do you want to say, let's separate entirely, which is one of a couple of choices, which is maintain the territorial integrity of the state of the continent, which is so strategically valuable. It's you can't walk away from. We'd have to kill a lot of people if that was the case. So you can't really break the place up, right? What you can do is say we can break into states in the European model, and we can all sort of go our own ways. And then one of the ways we do that is we say that the current state boundaries are irrelevant. You can create whatever boundaries you want.
Right. So that goes to this premise that I've been discussing with my locals is I would call county fluidity.
Yes, exactly.
The county gets to decide what state they belong to, right, without regard to anything.
Without regard to anything. And then but you do have to take out the shithole cities. They have to become their own. They have to be separated from the state. So Chicago has to be taken out of Illinois. Right.
Okay, wait. I want to develop this, so I apologize. So I want to, since we went to the trouble of naming them as shithole cities, will you name them all? Because I can't believe there's but a handful.
I did it this morning.
Oh.
I have this problem with doing details. I really like them.
I like details. And write them all down. He writes everything down, everybody. He really does. He types it all in his little computer. And it's in there somewhere. I know it.
My tweets from today at April 8th at 10:23 a.m.
Okay.
And I've got a net domestic migration by county. I can actually put this on the screen, can't I?
Really? That's exciting.
I can put this on the screen. Is there anything that's going to be shown here if I show this? No, this is okay. I'm gonna share my screen. Ready?
Yes, sir.
Zoom, share screen. Google Chrome, share.
There we go.
Okay. So this is
beautiful.
sorry.
It's beautiful.
So this is a net domestic migration by county. I might zoom in a little bit here.
Yes.
So this is recent. And so a place that's the brown
Yeah.
is
Negative.
orange is a place of people leaving. And a blue is the place of people going.
Wow.
So you can identify the shithole cities.
Oh my.
Right? You can identify the shithole cities. So I did.
You write them all down. Yeah.
Out of cosmopolitan shithole international immigration cities: Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Boston, the broader shithole state of Mass, the entire shithole state of Connecticut, including Hartford, Meriden, New York, Bridgeport, New London, the shithole city state of New York, greater metropolitan area, including New Jersey, the Baltimore, DC shithole megaplex, the Miami metropolitan region, and the legacy disaster post Hurricane New Orleans. And you're seeing them migrate into nationalism, which is white Christian redneck, meaning civilized regions. That's what you're saying. See, look. So, I mean, we used to laugh about Florida because it was like the capital of rednecks.
Yeah.
But it's a capital.
That's where they want to go.
They want to go. People want to be around rednecks. Now, the thing that's really surprising is this. Look at this.
It's all like Appalachia.
Right. You know what the land prices. But you have these are three pretty good states here.
Yeah.
So I didn't include Denver. I don't know why I didn't include Denver. It's not really. I don't know if it's a shithole yet or not. Anyway, so yeah, I named the shithole cities.
That Long Island and that whole area is just something else, man.
I mean, it's pretty horrible. I mean, it's this called the in who used to is it Neil Stephenson or who called it the Boston, DC, New York,
More, yeah.
metropolitan axis. This is the center of immigrant shitholdom, and this is the legacy of
Iron Rust Belt.
Boundary, right? This is the problem of this is an isolatable problem. Of course, Illinois is being killed by Chicago.
Yes.
State. Detroit's obvious, right? Detroit's a shithole.
Oh my.
So you expect these things to happen down in here because what's happening is people are moving out of the city into the surrounding area.
Yes. There's a lot of migration going to Texas, though.
Oh, this is insane. Well, I mean, realistically, it's pretty obvious what's going on. They're moving, and where are they not moving? This is the concentration of Black America is right here.
Yeah.
Right, it's right here, and it's really dense along here. So you can see it also in this belt here. So what you see is people moving. Look at this. This is the whitest part of the country. Yes. Right. Now, without Portland turning into a shithole, this used to be a pretty awesome place. But Portland's turning into a shithole, which is too bad. We used to say that the hippies, because I lived here, right?
Yeah.
So we say that the hippies moved to Portland and the yuppies moved to Seattle.
Yeah.
And the crazy fucks all live in California.
Boy, that is just.
Oh, I have a better one. Let me find it.
There was a funny map. There was the The Californians are talking about making a new state in California from most of the counties and clipping out just 3 counties
Yes.
for residual state. So they're seceding from the state to make their own state, and that fixes the problem pretty well. But it's temporary because you haven't fixed the law. Okay.
This one's pretty good. Can you see this?
Okay.
Can you see the sex ratio by county?
Yeah.
So this
That's
is
very interesting.
so where do women go? Oh, this one's not as good.
So the women are in the dark blue areas.
No, the ratio.
Right. This is it's women to men. Right?
This one's not good. No, I want the
No, it's the number of sex is calculated the number of males per 100 females.
All right, so
The blue places are where there's too many men,
right?
not enough women.
Right.
Hmm.
So the women are going to concentrate. Let's see. There's a dot map version of this. It's way better. But look where women are concentrating. There's a difference here because the men leave. And I always found this really interesting is, of course, this is why you can't find a woman in Seattle. The dot map version, if I can search for it by dot map. I have hard drives filled with this stuff. I just, it's like finding it out. Finding it on Google is way faster than finding it on.
Yeah, I understand you.
Finding it on my hard drive. Hello. Yeah, that's a better example.
Okay. That's just interesting.
So you get the idea is that women go to where they can find an alpha male, even if it results in an ovary graveyard.
Yeah, that doesn't matter to them.
Right. So that's what it does. So I'm going to close this now. So we're off this. We're off the screen now.
Yes.
So E.O. Wilson said, I don't know when you wrote that. When did you write that book? He said you're going to be able to do what we've done here. He said someone would be able to do it. I'm kind of surprised that he didn't do it, right?
Do what?
E.O. Wilson. He's he's basically the origin of sociobiology, the unification of sociology and biology.
Yeah.
He said we were going to be able to unify the sciences. And he said it would be possible. Now, I think there's an interesting correlation here that if you allow me to be a little esoteric for a minute, would that be okay?
Please do.
So the reason what we have done is we've simply worked back from language, right, which is demonstrated behavior.
Okay.
Through to, and we've united language, behavior, and neurology and sex
Physics.
and things. We've reunited the whole system, and the frame we use is evolutionary computation. Right?
Yes.
Basic first principle of the universe is that it accumulates mass by evolutionary computation, or you could say it accumulates density, which displaces the quantum background, which causes a thing called mass, which is whatever. So, so we've done this by working backwards from language. One of the things that I've been, and so it's hard for people to understand that don't do, in other words, if you're not close to our work, you don't understand how we're working back from language as actions, like demonstrated behaviors, back into the brain and the behavior and etc. So we're doing language and behavior. So there's a same thing happening in AI that is, I brought up earlier in one of our talks, but I thought it'd be worth repeating, is that most of us thought, and you can see this in Google's attempt and in Facebook's attempt and in Tesla's attempt, and almost everybody's attempt to create an AI by working from the bottom up, which is sense perception, embodiment, right? Spatial orientation, spatial disambiguation, and then object disambiguation, and then what actions are possible. And we expected this to turn into AI.
Mm-hmm.
We would eventually keep adding layers. And the reason you do that is because you say, well, I just want to have the fewest number of errors as I evolve. Does that make sense, right?
Right.
So you're in control of this thing as you're evolving it, because you've made these layers. What the language models, those large language models, is doing the opposite. They're actually reconstructing the essentially equivalent of neural networks about all human knowledge by looking at language, linguistic expression. The problem is that it's got an infinite amount of knowledge. It doesn't make any sense to it. So every time I get something wrong, but it gets better. So it's the large language models are working backward pretty successfully and really quickly toward using the top-down model of developing an AI rather than the bottom-up. Now the problem here is we have no idea what's going on inside this fucking thing.
That's right.
Right now, some models like Google's tell you where it's getting it. And when you ask Bing today, it will tell you where it's getting the information from. That's pretty useful. I find that pretty awe-inspiring. But it's sort of like the kid trying to figure out how to pronounce things. It hears things and it's like I sort of know the direction of this.
Right.
Right. And so it's just working backwards. And it's just interesting to me that what we've done, which is reverse engineering the mind from demonstrated language, they're reverse engineering the mind from demonstrated language. The difference is we have the first principle and it doesn't, and we can see all of that stuff. So it's trying to learn it. The freaky shit is the rate at which it's learning stuff every day, every week is kind of creepy, right?
What do you mean by that?
The amount of stuff that comes out I actually can't keep up with it.
What stuff are you talking about?
New research, new papers, new examples, new code. Okay. Like somebody just did a thing where he doesn't know how to code at all. I just asked it to write this whole thing for him, and it was pretty sophisticated. I was floored.
Wrote a code?
It wrote all the code for him. And all he does is iteratively ask it questions, just like you and I would communicate. So it's say, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And all of a sudden it's working. So the other thing is that they've got one version that does incrementally. So go do this, then this, then this, then this. And it goes off and does all those things. But it's got it all in context. So it doesn't lose context.
Okay.
And then we've got the ones that you're using GPT-3 or GPT-4 to train what it is, llama or whatever it is.
Yes.
Or change the other one. So these things are beginning to get to the point where where you and I would converse with each other to falsify, basically test our ideas.
Yeah.
And we would exchange information. The damn neural nets are starting to do this with language, and they're working back toward increasingly falsifying what they have, right? They have in mind. And it's just absolutely fucking stunning. The only problem is, that's what we're saying, this is these LLMs require a lot of compute time, right? Because they're all relying on back propagation, which means if you have this long, deep neural network, which means it's got a lot of layers. I don't know how many, I don't know what's
right.
Right. If something's wrong, you tell it what the right answer is, and then it goes back and adjusts the weights in the tree until it's got the
just so it takes a minute.
Right. So it takes a minute, right? And so the compute on that is really, really high. Whereas if you have neuromorphic computing, it does it at the same time. Just like you and I predict, you say, I want to catch this fly. The fact that you even envision it, your brain calculates the physical motion at the same time.
Yeah.
So we need that. So the rate, so I just want to say it's an interesting correlation between what we're doing, which, what's my new friend's name? I can't remember his name is right now. He's like, we work with computational linguistics, which is essentially the same thing we're doing.
Okay.
They reduce numbers and we don't. We maintain language as ordinal rather than cardinal positions, but it's the same idea.
Okay.
And so when that so we're both approaching the same problem from the different means. So the big revolution to me was that every time we've tried to do this with language before, it's failed. And it turns out it's just volume. Right? It's just you need so much data,
right,
to be able to do it. And so the big revolution to me was that shit, this is working. It's working phenomenally. It's terrifying, actually.
Why is it terrifying?
Well, because we can't control it, right? And the rate of change is so amazing that I'm like, I can't control it. I mean, we don't know why it's doing what it's doing. I can tell you that I know what it's doing, because there's only one way to do what it's doing, which is to build the same thing up that we have up here, which is how do you produce language from all this blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And just as you and I, just as language consists of continuous recursive disambiguation,
yes,
the process that the large language models use is continuous recursive disambiguation. It starts a phrase and just keeps disambiguating it until it's done.
Yes.
Right. And so it's just interesting to me that we always assumed that we would solve this problem bottom up, being in control.
Right.
Rather than top down, letting falsification of conflict and prediction produce self control, which is just fascinating to me. I don't know. I thought that was just the interesting parallel between our solution and theirs and the AI one is just fascinating to me.
Now, here's a question that I've been thinking about this for a while now, maybe an hour and a half, maybe something like that, which is what I will call the lie detector is an AI that detects and analyzes lies.
Yes.
What do we have to do to get this rolling?
I
need
think
this machine functioning.
It's not one of the reasons I want to work on the Constitution first is that we just feed it the Constitution.
Okay.
And then to train it, we have to ask it the questions that are the 130 moral questions, right? 130 questions of law until we get the right answer. So we just work through those questions because they start at the bottom and work their way up.
Right.
So we've just started and say, if you can answer these questions, you've got it. What'll happen in some of those cases, we'll find a way that it's confused. And we'll say, okay, we haven't enumerated this definition broadly enough or something. But
right.
As far as I know,
it has to pass. It has to go through the judges to be qualified to be released.
Yeah, I mean, in other words, we can give it the rules, but then we've got to give it contexts, right? And so one way you would do that is you'd write, is that, of course, we have some terms here that need very specific definitions.
Right.
So we have to have the definitions of the terms,
Yes.
and we have to have the causal relations, right?
Yes.
Which is always ternary shit. So once we have that, then you train it by solving we can either write what we believe the moral answer is to, let's say,
Right.
abortion or something, and then because that's an undecidable one. And then we can write out those 130 to train it. And honestly, most stuff will be derived from it. Now, there's already tools out there. I don't want to go name them here, but Laying Chain and a couple of others. I mean, the ability to do this is already open source and public. The work for us will be like you notice that how much trouble they're having training GPT-3, GPT-4, GPT-5. Right? They finished 4 in last summer, I think, and released it this spring.
Yeah.
And they'll finish training GPT-5 in, they say, December of this year. And so when will it be released? I don't fucking know. Right. So it's not forever away. It looks like it's getting shorter cycles.
Yeah.
Well, we have the same problem, is that that programming it, which is giving it the rules, and then training it, which is so it understands the logic. That's going to require a little bit of work. Is this a phenomenal amount of work? No. I think we'll be surprised when it gets right off the bat.
Yes.
Because the question is, how do we give priority to our definitions of terms?
Yes.
Right. I mean, I don't know how to segment that, but that's it. So the tools are already out there. They're already open source. So all we have to do is have the Constitution, which is the reduced version, right? It's nature, man, language, natural law. It's, rights and obligations.
I think I can give you your answers like this: is when you make a definition, you call it the unambiguous definition. And then it's like this: for the purposes of the answer which you are going to give the use unambiguous definitions.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know how to. There's got to be some way to adjust the weights to make sure that happens. And until I get down in the weeds, I won't know how to.
I understand you. I'm not going to try to tell you how to do your job, because
well, I mean, the truth is, I bet we can raise the money to fund that, so I don't have to do it. Right? I mean,
that would be good. So we're working on the Constitution. How's that work coming along?
It's fun if we keep doing this pace where I have where you and I spend a weekend day, where Brandon on the law, on the principles, and Brandon and I spend a day on the constitutional stuff. And if I can start looping Martin in on the laws as well, I think we'll be okay. I can certainly have Martin edit the thing, but I don't seem to be able to encourage him to take initiative in working on anything without being a pair work. And I can understand, because if I work with you or I work with Brand, it goes 10 times faster than if I go by myself. So I mean, it's quite a bit easier. In programming, call it peer programming.
Right.
It's quite a bit easier. I mean, one thing I want to say for you and the audience is that, holy crap, Brandon's gotten good. I mean, seriously, wow.
Very good.
Well, he's previously been such a man of few words.
Quiet, right?
Right. He's just not a man. Not a person who speaks in extraneous terms. Right. He doesn't use long sentences. He uses simple declarations, and he jumps to the conclusion. Right. And so he's a very parsimonious guy. But working on some of the stuff we worked on, which is right in front of me right now, yesterday, I'm like, Jesus, Brandon, that come out of your mouth? That was fucking brilliant. So, and it's just amazing. And I think this is true for everybody. It's that if I can get the sketch in place, you know, you know what I mean? If I can get I get the sketch in place, it just turns out to be easier for everyone. All right, we've gone over our 2 hours. Usually we do this for 2 hours.
That's correct.
Did I satisfy your question Q&As today?
I'm satisfied. I thought it was a very good conversation, very interesting.
That was awesome. I really enjoyed your questions today. They were fantastic. They got us some great ideas across. There's some things we should probably clip out of this one because it's pretty useful.
Very good. Now, I would like to chat with you after our conversation, Curt.
All right. So, Brent, can you do the like, subscribe thing?
Please do it. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification button because you want to hear when these come out. And we always want to read your delightful comments below.
Thanks all. I'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Curt.
So I stop recording.